Let's have a look at digestive enzymes. So you need to be able to talk about the journey that the food takes from entering the mouth, the start of digestion, to when the waste products leave via the rectum. So let's have a look at the order. So we've got the mouth, and then the food would go down the esophagus or the gullet, into the stomach, from the stomach through to the small intestine, through the large intestine, and finally any waste products would leave out of the rectum, which is the last little part of the large intestine. You also need to know why the liver is important in digestion, and also the pancreas, and we'll come on to those in a minute. So when we talk about enzymes being used in digestion, if I show you this animation, the easiest way to think about it is like enzymes are sort of like scissors that are chopping up larger chain molecules. So for example, if we think about carbohydrates, we've got a starch molecule here, and then we would get the enzyme, which would be carbohydrase or amylase in this particular instance. So here are the is the enzyme amylase, which, like I said before, it's acting as chemical scissors, and it's breaking down that starch into smaller molecules of sugar. Exactly the same for the other ones. We've got proteins, which are large chain, made up of large chains of amino acids. So this time the enzyme would be protease, and again they simply break down or chop up this larger chain into smaller amino acids, which then makes it easier for these smaller molecules to be absorbed into the blood, which happens through the lining of the small intestine. We'll come on to this in a little bit more detail, but I just wanted to help visualise and help show you how enzymes actually act on those nutrient groups. So let's have a look at digestion. So it starts in the mouth, I said earlier. The two types of digestion, or food, is broken down in two ways. There's mechanical digestion, which is things like the grinding of the teeth and the stomach churning up the food. And then you've got chemical digestion, which is where the enzymes are important. The role the enzymes play in breaking down the food. Okay, so food enters the mouth, so you've got that mechanical digestion taking place straight away. The teeth are grinding up the food, helping to chop it up into smaller pieces. Saliva is produced from the salivary glands in the mouth. This helps to moisten the food, lubricate the food. And then we've got the start of chemical digestion, and we've got this first enzyme, amylase, which works inside the mouth. Amylase breaks down starch into sugar. Then the food goes down the esophagus, it's swallowed, it goes down the esophagus, and it's helped push down by waves of muscular contractions, and this is called peristalsis. So you can see here the muscular wall, it squeezes, it relaxes, it contracts, and it's pushing the food down into the stomach. We've got further mechanical digestion taking place here, where the muscular walls are churning up the food constantly. The pH of the stomach is acidic. This does a couple of things. It helps to kill off any bacteria that might be on the food, but the most important thing that you need to know about is it creates the right conditions for the enzymes to act in the stomach. Okay, so as you can see, if we just go back, I'll just show you that bit again. It goes down the esophagus into the stomach. Oh, let's press play again. Down into the stomach, and then we have the enzyme protease, which works here. The protease enzymes will break down proteins into amino acids. Okay. From here, the food then travels down into the small intestine, and you can see here the pancreas releases more enzymes and the food is mixed with bile. Now this is as far as this animation goes, but you've got to imagine now the food is travelling down into the small intestine and all three enzymes working. You've got colour coding to remind you. You have more amylase, which was working in the mouth also, breaking down the starch into sugars. We have the protease, which was just working in the stomach, breaking down the proteins into amino acids. And then you also have lipase enzymes, which break up the last of the major nutrient groups, which is the fats, and it breaks the fats down into fatty acids and glycerol. And just to recap, we said bile acts here as well. Bile is made in the liver, and what the bile does is two things. It helps to emulsify the fats, so it creates a big surface area. If you imagine, it sort of chops them up a little bit, not breaking them down, but it chops them up so that you've got a bigger surface area, lots of little blobs of fats, so that the lipase enzymes can now act more quickly to break down the fats into fatty acids and glycerol. The other thing that bile does is it neutralises the acids that come from the stomach. The correct pH for the enzymes working inside the small intestine is alkaline. So the bile neutralises the acid that's coming from the stomach to give an overall alkaline condition inside of the small intestine. Okay, just going to skip ahead. This is recapping. So we've got the mouth, and then you can see the peristalsis going down the gullet that I showed you before on the animation. The stomach, we talked about the proteins being broken down into amino acids. The optimum pH is acidic. Food goes into the small intestine. And so there's three enzymes working here. Works in an alkaline pH. And these here are villi, so these protrude along the lining of the small intestine. The small intestine is where digestion ends as such. It's the most important part really, because it's where all those nutrients that have been broken down into sugars, into fatty acids and glycerol, into amino acids, all those tiny little molecules, now they are absorbed. If this is inside of the small intestine, you've got a good blood supply that runs all the way around here. So it means that all the little broken down nutrients that would be all here, these go all the way along the small intestine. You imagine all the little particles of food are here. They can now move across, because they're tiny, because they've been broken down by the enzyme, can move across the lining and into the blood, so that the blood can then carry them to where they're needed. So these villi create a big surface area in the small intestine for absorption to take place. The digestion process ends in the small intestine, and all that happens now is any leftover, any waste products will make their way down. So anything that's not really needed, that hasn't been absorbed into the blood, will make their way down into the large intestine. For example, fibre, which is important in helping food move through the digestive system, that isn't actually digested, it just acts as a bulkage to push the rest of the food down. So we get all the rest of the waste travelling along the large intestine. Any excess water now that might be left over is reabsorbed into the blood, and we get the waste travelling all the way down, and it produces faeces. It sits here towards the end in the rectum until the person goes to the toilet, obviously, and empties their bowels. So rectum is where faeces is stored, and the anus is where it leaves. Little recap here, which you actually will have done in class. We've got the mouth, Amylase, the enzyme, breaks down starch into sugars. The stomach, protease, breaks down protein into amino acids. Small intestine, we've got the protease, again breaking down proteins into amino acids. Amylase, breaking down starch into sugars. And lipase, breaking down fats into fatty acids and glycerol. Make sure you can explain the role of the liver in creating the bile, what the bile is used for. You need to go back if you can't remember what I've said. The gallbladder is just where the bile is actually stored. You need to be able to explain how the stomach creates the right conditions for the enzymes to work, and also how that acidic environment is neutralised when the food makes its way into the small intestine, and that comes back to explaining why the liver is important in producing the bile. So you need to be able to do all of that. Good luck. Goodbye.